All right, Clint and Steph here. We're going to be talking about incels. Incels are kind of new for me. I know, Steph, you haven't had a lot of exposure to the concept.
I've never really heard of them until recently you told me about it a little bit.
So I thought this was interesting just because I think it's a relatively new phenomenon. I mean, it's new and it's not new at the same time. So basically the definition, an incel, so incel itself stands for involuntarily celibate. So basically it is a group of guys, individual men, young men usually, who are for one reason or another so unattractive that they can't get dates or have any kind of, intimate relationships.
Do they think they're unattractive, or are they really unattractive?
I mean, I think they probably yes and yes, but a big part of it is that it's actually, now that it's been labeled, they've taken the term on, so they've sort of accepted that they're so ugly or unattractive or, so awkward or whatever it might be.
And do they get that way because they just don't get dates, or they don't get relationships, and so therefore they think they are ugly and they think they don't have that, and so they just label themselves as an incel?
Might be part of it. From what I can gather, it sort of the ideology surrounding incels started on either 4chan or on Reddit. There's a lot of information out there, and I actually found a little definition here of their ideology. It says, the incel ideology follows as such. Incels believe that they are irredeemably ugly, and that is why they cannot have sexual or romantic relationships. They believe that no amount of self-improvement, mentality, or physicality will improve their prospects. This is because incels think women only care about a man's appearance. So first off, what do you see some problems with that line of thinking?
Yeah, they're not motivated at all. They don't think that they can improve. They don't think that they can, get someone, I guess. And to me, that's kind of sad if you are at that point where you think that.
Yeah. And, some of it is they've got drawings online and some of it's almost funny, but it's sad. It's just this dark humor. And then sometimes it's just dark and kind of depressing. But so the interesting thing to me is they have new names, or they've created archetypes of people. For example, an incel is an archetype of a person. Then they have chads, and that's basically your alpha male hunk that can get any girl he wants, and he's got it all. Then you've got beta males, who technically, because I'm a married man, they'd consider me a beta male.
Because you're married?
Because I'm married, yeah. Because if I was a chad, I would just be
going from
bachelor.
One person to another
Yep.
person and
yeah,
living the single life, I guess.
really interesting perspective on the world. And then for women, they have several names for women. Roasty is one of them.
And what is that?
It's for a woman. It's actually pretty foul as to how they get the description. So I don't know if it's for Sweetcast, but it's also not very accurate. So some of these definitions they're you can tell that they're made up by virgins. It's almost it's a fantasy. So they even, let me find this other thing they call women, femoid, and it's like a female and a humanoid. So basically they're showing like a humanoid is some kind of creature that resembles a human, but it's not a human.
So they're degrading females by saying that they don't look like humans?
They're basically saying that, yeah, women are different than, they're a different species, essentially.
Than men?
Than at least incels. Well, yeah, altogether. And this kind of just shows how
they think.
Yeah, they're so far removed from reality.
That's really weird. I don't understand how someone can get to that point.
Yeah, and so this is, to me, I mean, this is a relatively new phenomenon. There's always been ugly people, or people with, social issues, or even, disabilities, mental or otherwise, that would live a life and be single. But the new part here is to sort of embrace it in this really negative way and call yourself an incel. I don't think this is healthy, and there are some examples. A famous one is Elliot Rogers. A few years back, he committed a mass shooting. Why don't we? I'm gonna pull up the video here and watch. He had a YouTube channel, and I want you to pay attention. Stuff, tell me, notice how he acts and what he says. And this has sort of been the poster boy for incels going forward. So there was a light. My understanding, there was a loose group of people who believed they were incels. But once Elliot Rogers committed this mass murder, then it sort of solidified the idea. So here is Elliot Rogers' last YouTube video.
Hi, Elliot Roger here. Well, this is my last video. It all has to come to this. Tomorrow is the day of retribution. The day in which I will have my revenge against humanity, against all of you. For the last 8 years of my life, ever since I've hit puberty, I've been forced to endure an existence of loneliness, rejection, and unfulfilled desires, all because girls have never been attracted to me. Girls gave their affection and sex and love to other men, but never to me.
Okay, so that's just a little clip of it, but a couple things that strike me. I've never been a good judge of other men looks-wise unless they're either extremely attractive or extremely ugly. To me, just at first appearance, before he starts speaking, he seems like just an average guy.
Yeah, he's definitely not ugly. He's not the most attractive person either. But I wouldn't consider him to be labeled as an incel because they're just so ugly. He's not like that at all, I think. But
so, yeah, his problem, and once he gets talking, looking at his eyes and just how he presents himself, he seems pretty awkward. And granted, recording yourself can be awkward, but there's definitely mental issues that are behind this, and probably some social issues.
Yeah.
Which, a lot of those things could be overcome. I mean, to some degree or another, I don't know a lot about his mental history, but that was something that stood out to me.
Or his personal history. I feel like a lot of times people are different, or they act weird because of things that have gone in their past, things that they have
endured,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and he was 22 years old. So in reality, he was really young. I mean, part of it, and part of their ideology, if we look more into it, is there's sort of this expectation that I think is pushed by the media that, there are certain checkpoints you need to hit. So when you're in high school, you're 16, you should have sex for the first time. You should have a girlfriend and sort of have those experiences. And so if you live into your early 20s, then there's something wrong with you, which, you're still really, really young in your early 20s. I mean, so that I can understand where some of the fear comes from, just from the media.
From the world setting those standards.
Right. Yeah. So I don't necessarily have answers. I don't think anybody has answers, but this is sort of a community online that is building up steam. And I just have sort of one point to make, and that is, by calling yourself an incel, you're accepting that you're labeled that way. And once you do that, it's really hard to break out of it once you start defining yourself that way.
Because then you start to think that you can't get a relationship and you can't attract anyone. And then once you start thinking that, then I feel like a lot of your thoughts turn into actions. And so, yeah, of course, they're not going to with that mindset.
Yeah. I once saw, it was an interview, I think it was on the Joe Rogan podcast actually, but a gentleman that was captured by Somali pirates, and he lived in captivity there for 2 years. And when he was done, he knew that he had PTSD, but in talking with his psychologist, the psychologist told him not to put a label on it because he should not pathologize it. Basically, by admitting that you've got this kind of problem that you can't really deal with, it actually makes the problem worse, which is interesting, and it's a little different than how you might think about it. But I think in this case, it makes sense. If you say that you're an incel and you've sort of accepted that label, then you've just pigeonholed yourself, and you're refusing to change or to better yourself or to just give yourself some time, have some hope.
I definitely agree.
So I think the big thing here for me is that incels didn't exist many, many years ago. I don't know exactly when they started, but we'll say in the 90s, incel wasn't a thing. Any earlier than that, it wasn't a thing. There have always been people that were not attractive or
people that were single.
Yeah. But accepting it and then sort of building anger toward women over it, I think that's a huge mistake. And so I would love to help people with this. I don't personally know anybody that is in that group. I imagine it's pretty small, but I'd like to keep it small.